all towards the development of the child. The child is at the center of whatever they do. However, there are situations and times when this delicate balance is not honored by one or even both of the parents involved. And what happens is the focus comes off of the child and onto the individual winning a perceived competition, or maybe even a real competition, between the co-parents. This does not bode well for the child at all. It creates parental alienation, where one parent or both parents vie for the affections of the child to the detriment of not only the other parent's relationship with the child, but also to the detriment of the child's proper development. Narcissism and parental alienation have a very interesting relationship. We're going to explore this in Family Fest this year.
Reverend Dr. Gordon A.R. Edwards. Narcissism and parental alienation, I believe, go hand in hand. It's almost difficult, impossible even, to picture a narcissist as a parent, because narcissism in and of itself posits that a narcissist does not understand what it means to love or to show empathy, to show care, to mirror and pay attention to what's going on in the child. So you can understand how difficult it would be for a narcissist to be a parent. But here is the thing though. Narcissism cuts across and prevents a child from developing normally, because the narcissist is all into self and self-interest rather than the interests of the other. So those, say, the first 3 years of life, 2.5 to 3 years of life, when the child's sense of self and attachment or relationship styles are developing. Imagine a parent being narcissist and then also having to be consistently and sensitively responding to the emotional needs of a child. It's virtually impossible. because the narcissist cannot develop a sense of connection with someone else.
We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness. With God on our side, we're marching strong, looking out for hurting children all around, and helping the parents carry on. Standing united, we'll overcome. We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness.
And a blessed good evening to you. It's a wonderful Sunday, July the 7th, 2024. And this is Family Fest. We are in our July series of panel discussions. This year, we're focusing on the topic of narcissism and parental alienation. Welcome to each and every one of you. We're looking forward to a very interesting discussion this evening as we look at the possibility of hope for the alienated parent. Okay, narcissism and parental alienation, we've already divided into two, the alienator and the alienated parent. And we're going to be looking at the possibility of hope for the alienated parent this evening. In our previous discussion, we just explored parental alienation's devastating impact on the alienated parent. We went really in depth into it and looked at some of the effects that can come on a parent who is alienated. Yes, we are looking mainly this week from the point of view of the men, but while the phenomenon is hard and painful, this discussion today, we want to examine whether or not there's any hope for parents who are victims of this diabolical reality. That's what Family Fest is here to do, bring hope. It's one of the 4 H's that is our mandate. So this evening, the question is whether or not there is in fact hope for the alienated parent in recovering lost relationships with their child or children. If there is in fact hope, what does that hope look like? What process would they have to go through? And what encouragement can we give to parents for being able to recover their relationships with their alienated child or children? This evening with me on the panel are Sean Springer, Reverend Bernard Bean, and Cornelius Bartlett. I'm just gonna say good evening to you gentlemen and ask that you each say a little bit about yourself and introduce your relationship to this topic this evening. How are you, how do you know of narcissism and parental alienation?
Yeah, you didn't say who's going to go first. So since you called my name first, I'm going to go first.
It's an open evening. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
Like I said, my name is Sean Springer. I have a background in social work, degree in social work, work as a counselor for a number of years. I did a number of parenting workshops, both with the National Task Force on Crime Prevention, work with men as well. And outside of that, I have 3 children. And I also believe that I am a survivor of parent alienation.
Okay, I guess I'm up next. My name is Cornelius Bartlett. I happen to be the chairman and founder of Family Fest Barbados, but I'm also a massive family advocate. And because I'm interested in families and everything that involves families, I actually spend a lot of my spare time. I would call it a hobby, one of my hobbies, studying human behavior. So this issue of narcissism and parental alienation caught my attention about 2 years ago. And I've been actually studying it from since then to this present day. I've also been on television in discussions on the topic, and I've had calls from several men who are experiencing and who have experienced it. So I would say that I have knowledge from both sides of the coin in terms of this particular topic. And that's pretty much it about me in a nutshell.
I guess that leaves me. I am Bernard Bean. I'm an Anglican priest, a rector of the Church of the Holy Trinity. I've been ordained for 20 years, married, and I'm a workplace chaplain, youth chaplain. I'm also a certified secondary school teacher, and of course, a counseling psychologist. And so we're looking at it not only from a spiritual, but also from a psychological standpoint. I want to congratulate you on this very timely topic. And tonight, as we discuss this very challenging issue that affects so many families, parental alienation, and we know that its impact is both on children and parents is very profound, often resulting in emotional pain, broken trust, and strained relationships. We know that for the child, parental alienation can lead to feelings of confusion, loss, and loyalty and conflict. But in spite of the significant challenges posed by parental alienation, there is hope through a combination, I believe, of psychological and spiritual strategies, which we hope to discuss tonight. And so I look forward to being a part of tonight's conversation. And thank you for having me here with you.
Thank you so very much, Reverend Bean, and welcome to all of our panelists. And just reminding you, as you watch along on the discussion, that you can chime in on our Facebook and on our YouTube with your comments and questions for, I was going to say immediate feedback, but timely feedback, I think, is probably a little more accurate. So let's get started. And I'm going to start with you, Reverend Bean, because I think you actually started in on the topic by saying that you do believe that there is hope for the alienated parent. So I'm going to get you to expand on that. There is hope for the alienated parent, the person who has struggled. And the last time we met, we did discuss the fact that it can be a very lengthy process, but they've struggled with this alienation from their child or children. Is there really hope for them?
Thank you. And I do believe that there is, of course, hope. As a matter of fact, being a Christian and a priest, our whole message and everything is about hope. But scientific evidence also point to the fact that there is hope. There's hope through legal methods. That is, sometimes we have to take this to the courts to be able to access the child and to be able to be the kind of parent we would like to be, because sometimes, of course, we don't have access to the child. There is hope because the alienated parent, though alienated, must also find the strength to be persistent, persistent in their efforts. And this persistence, we believe, can, and of course, has led to improvement in the parent child, that is the alienated parent child relationship. And of course, there's therapy, family therapy, which is highly recommended, individual therapy for the parents, and of course, especially for the child, where we create a space, a safe space, where the child can freely express themselves using various techniques. In this therapy, there must be psychoeducation as well for all parties concerned. I believe that some of these interventions can lead to restoration of that relationship. And of course, evidence also point to the same thing. There are a number of other strategies that we can talk about, but I want to start with that point, that there is hope using the legal methods, using therapeutic interventions can bring a source of hope.
Go ahead, Sean. And I'm going to ask you gentlemen to just flow behind each other and feel free to respond to each other's comments as well.
Yeah, sure. I also agree that there's hope with work, with understanding the whole issues of the narcissistic behavior and the alienation, because these are two different things, or these are two issues in and of themselves. Narcissistic behavior and alienation. So when you combine the two of those together now, you're having almost you have a double impact, because you're combining two social issues to make one. The person who is alienated from their child, I do believe from my own personal experience that with the right techniques and training and so on, I don't know if I'm going to go into some of them now, they can actually rebuild that relationship. One of the key things that is going to be called for is patience and understanding. Of area, is spoken about trying to understand, and this is going to be really difficult to do, right? Trying to understand the place that the person who's doing the alienating, or the alienator, as we call them, try to understand the place where they're coming from. Because most persons who are alienators, I don't believe, when they're thinking about having children, they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to be a narcissistic alienator. I don't believe so. I believe that the narcissistic person comes about as a result of some social ill, being alienated themselves, or being overindulged, or some type of abuse that may have happened as a child. So what we are seeing then is a cycle. So I'm thinking that, first of all, we need to understand that place that the alienator is coming from. As the alienated, have conversations with your children. You may not get a lot of time, but the little time that you get with your children, you make that quality time. It may not be quantity time, but you make it quality time, so that your children can begin to see that maybe the stuff that's being said about you by the alienator isn't true. And eventually would get to recognize then that you are not the picture that's being painted. The other thing I'm going to suggest is that you, as an alienator, do not give in to the temptation of trying to you as alienated, do not fall to the temptation of trying to paint the alienator black as well. Because it's very easy for us to decide, okay, this parent is painting me black. Let me get my revenge back And let me also say some negative things and so on about them. It is very easy to fall into that temptation. So what I would suggest is that you don't. It's going to call for a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of understanding. I mean, the Bible says, when you get the slap on one cheek, turn the other cheek. It's going to cause for a lot of turning the other cheek. Yes, that's where I'm going to start with that.
Okay, very good opening, gentlemen. I want to first of all start by saying that this issue of parental alienation is so complex that I wouldn't want to say that there's any one pill. I want to say that there are many considerations and many caveats within the hope, within the purview of hope. So let me just say this. First of all, hope for you as the alienated has to do with the age of your child or children. That's the first thing. So the dynamics of what you can do as a parent is a little bit different if your child is 5 or 6 years old, as opposed to if your child is a teenager, 14, 15, 16. That's the first thing. Next thing, where you get, let's say, a legal intervention. And I want us to really consider this, because there are people that I speak to out there who are on the ground going through the reality of the complications of this thing called parental alienation. Let's say you get a court order that allows you to have a child, let's say, week on, week off. Understand that in the zone of parental alienation, the alienator literally drives a wedge between you and your child. They tell lies. They may go sharing information with the child that's inappropriate, because there are lots of pieces of information that an alienating parent can share with the child that is way above their age to dismantle and understand. So you get a court order where you have rights to have your child week on, week off. But the child's mind becomes so poisoned against you that while you were given a court order to have your child 1 week on and 1 week off, the child doesn't want to come. And then when you go back to court and you have, let's say, you might have persons in court who may not understand the psychological aspects of this dynamic. They may say that, but you must be doing the child something wrong or something bad. You must be abusing the child in some way. So I hope that when we listen and understand what this scenario I'm bringing, that we start to understand how treacherous these waters are, how complicated and complex it is, because you're talking about a court giving a parent, usually the father, who's normally the one that doesn't get custody. Most times the women get custody. So most times the alienator is actually the mother, but the child doesn't want to come. The other thing I would want to say now, after laying that foundation about hope, is that you have to find within yourself, and I'm hoping that the alienated is not a narcissist as well, because may God help those children who end up being born to both parents who are both narcissists. But we are assuming here that one parent is unhealthy, which is the alienator, and the other parent is healthy, which is the alienated. What the alienated must do, whether it's through counseling, through prayer, through faith, whatever it is, you need to find a way of allowing your significance and your peace to be based on something outside of the relationship with your child. If you, as a parent, believe that your child's relationship with you is the end all and be all, when the alienator takes that away from you, you would even go as far as sometimes contemplating an act of violence, even suicide. So I just want to lay the foundation there in terms of the fact that, one, it is complicated. Two, sometimes the court orders cannot be executed because the child who is the object of the custody battle doesn't want to come with you, because their mind has been they have been so brainwashed. The toxins have been injected into them by the alienator. And the final thing, as I just recap, is that you have to find significance for yourself beyond being the parent of that child. I would rest that there for now and allow you.
Just to piggyback on Cornelius,
Go ahead.
and total agreement with that. The poisoning and the brainwashing, which often leads to self-talk. And so the child is telling themselves, and in their own way, what they have been poisoned with. and they repeat it in their minds. And so it becomes their truth. And so when they go to the other parent, they are almost looking for things,
Yes.
looking for any little thing. And see, it's true. It is true. And that contributes to making the matter even worse. So it's interesting. You said also that we must find a greater meaning to life. I read in so many celebrities that are also struggling with parental alienation, and I say that because some sociologists once said that a social issue is not a social issue until the affluent are affected. A social issue is not a social issue until the affluent are affected by it. And so we hear that over 20 million families in America are affected by this. But then we hear Britney Spears saying that when she was alienated from her children, she felt as if a part of her died. You know, these are serious words. A part of her died. And you hear story after story after story where the loss of that connection and a relationship with the loved one can have tremendous impacts on the alienated. So then, how do we change the conversation in their minds? How
Very
do we
interesting,
then
Reverend
change
B.
the self-talk?
Yeah, I think that you struck something there that's very interesting and very relevant as far as our society is concerned. Whereas you said, if the affluent aren't affected, it doesn't become something that is a focus. But given the fact that we are here this evening, given the fact that we do have a number of people who have heard of this, who have experienced it, and do understand what it is, and yes, we are sharing knowledge this evening to make sure that understanding gets spread a little wider. But the fact of the matter is that we have, I think, as you rightly held up the example of Britney Spears, I think we have come to the place where it is recognized that no matter our status in life, we are affected by this, and it is critical. And I believe one of the areas of hope is the fact that the, the recovery journey is just about the same for everybody. I think that first, you laid it out very well earlier. We start with access. And Cornelius did mention that access is not a cure all, but it is a starting point. And once you have access, Cornelius did raise a very interesting point about the fact that the child may not want to attend. So you've made this attempt, you pushed for access to the child. I have made an opportunity for us to get together, and they don't want to show up. So gentlemen, I'm going to ask you, how does the alienated parent deal with that? The child do you force the child to come along? I do believe, in fact, that there are opportunities where you can have supervised visits. Do you succumb to that and allow somebody to sit in the room with you when you would really love to be intimate with your child? You would really love to just hold them and hug them and squeeze them, and instead you sit across from a table and have a kind of a stiff conversation. Where do you go from there once you've got that access?
Graham, what I would say is that it calls for a lot of wisdom. For example, let's say you're looking at a child that is, let's say, a primary school age, under 11. That child has sporting events. Even if the child doesn't want to come because of the brainwashing, as long as there's no restraining order telling you not to come within some distance of the child or whatever, you can go to that sporting event. The child might have a recital, maybe in a play or something. You can go and still let your face and your presence be felt, because what happens is when and if the child recovers years later, the child will have memory of, even though they would have been brainwashed back then, they would have had memory of you attending these events. And we'd be surprised to know that just doing the right thing throughout the whole process of the alienation, not what I said, doing the right thing is a form of planting seeds, seeds which will bear fruit in years to come. So that is one form of hope, but it calls for a lot of patience, and it calls for a parent who is being alienated to actually shelve their own feelings. I mean, if I were to put it in graphic terms, I would say when it comes to the pain and the turmoil that is placed upon you as an alienated parent, you literally have to get your emotions taken out in terms of the pain that you will feel naturally if you allow it to really take root. And just do the right thing. Just go into automatic pilot mode of doing the right thing. You know, one of the things that I always remember is the story of the prodigal son. And I looked at that recently because of the topic, and I said to myself, there may have been some element of parental alienation there. There may have been. I'm not saying the Bible says that. But this child somehow saw it fit to reject his father. And in rejecting his father, what I liked about the end of the story is that when he returned home, the father had met him with open arms and had a party. The father did not even want to be reminded. And I would recommend anyone to go and read that story and to use that as an example of how your posture has to be. If you have been alienated from your child for, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, every single day of that 10 years, you should have your hearts and your arms open to receive that child again lovingly. Because essentially, if you allow ego to take over, Graham, and listeners, if you allow ego to take over, you will make many missteps. Because if you allow ego to take over, when that child gets disrespectful, and disrespect and indifference towards you is part of alienation. In other words, you have been a nice, loving parent, and you can't understand why everything about you is an annoyance for this child. You will make some missteps, and if you allow ego to take over, you are going to actually do some very regretful things that will validate what the alienator is doing. So if you want to talk about hope, you need to talk about getting to a point of understanding yourself, which is why I like what Reverend Bean stated earlier about counseling or therapy. I think Sean would have mentioned it too. Therapy and counseling is extremely important, because if you cannot organize your emotions properly where you can deal with this child that is now so indifferent and disrespectful and is lying. So when I say lying, there are an alienating child or a child who is in the middle of alienation can come with you and have a great week, going to the beach, surfing, going car racing, playing football, cricket, doing all kinds of things. And when they get back home, they will say they did not have a good time. I've heard of a case as well where a parent who was being alienated, and after having a great time with his child, the child said, I didn't have a good time with dad. And that showed pictures of them having a good time, pictures of them frolicking and having a good time. And the child said, I was faking. I wasn't really happy. I was faking. That is how deep and sinister and dark this whole thing of parental alienation is. But we're talking this evening about hope. So I just want to advise any parent that is being alienated to get a hold of your emotions so that you don't react badly. If you need to get counseling, if you can't do it on your own, I would say to get counseling as a matter of emergency. I will leave that there for now.
Funny enough, Cornelius, when I was thinking about the topic, the same parable came to mind of the prodigal son. I didn't go as far as you did in thinking that there might have been some type of alienation going on there. I actually just dismissed it. But what I like about this story of the prodigal son, even though we know the father was basically unfair in this situation, why appreciate it? Yeah, humiliated, everything you can think about, every negative thing you can think about. But what I appreciated about this whole story is the fact that the father never stopped being a father or a loving father, even when the child stopped being a loving child. So let me go back then to the question that is asked in terms of what do we as parents do? You mentioned the whole thing about keeping your emotions in check. Well, that wasn't your exact words, but I think we need to own the emotion, recognize the emotion and own it. Recognize how And in most cases, we may respond in terms of anger, but reality is we're not angry. You're going to be hurt because at the end of the day, you're longing for a relationship with this child, and the child is being poisoned against you. So when the child comes to you and you show love, you get back hatred. So that obviously breeds a level of hurt and so on. Own that. Once you've owned it, then you make up in your mind that even when the child behaves like a child, you are going to behave like an adult. And that is extremely difficult because it's very easy when that child starts being rude to want to flip and that child forgetting where that child is coming from. And in most cases, if you listen carefully, even though you're going to hear the child speaking, you would actually hear the alienator's words.
That's right.
Coming through the child.
Exactly.
So therefore, to react to that child, you're now punishing the child for the alienator. So that's why I said before is in a call for some serious emotional intelligence. The little time that you have, and to use the situation that you were speaking about where the child said they were faking it, it's possible that the child could have been faking it in truth. I remember quite well, and this is not due to alienation. I remember quite well, my children came by me every weekend. And at the back of where I was living at the time, there was a fair size playing area. And there were some children in the area. My son spent the whole day outside playing cricket, playing football with the children in the area. I prepared lunch, took for them. I prepared snacks, took for them, and so on. And when I was taking him home the evening, I said to him, "You had a really good time today, no?" He said, "No." I said, "How come?" He said, "Because I wanted to play with you." Now, I was thinking that I was doing all I was supposed to be doing as a father, preparing the meals, making sure he's outside with his friends and so on. Whereas what he was looking for was to play with me, to play football with me, to play cricket with me, not the other boys around his age. Sometimes we as adults engage in the activities that we think the children would enjoy because maybe when we were that age, we would have enjoyed those activities without necessarily finding out from the children what is it that they would want to do. If you understand what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, have conversations with the child so you would know what they like. I know what you were saying is that maybe because the flip side can also be the case, whereas the child did have fun, but because the child does not want to disappoint the alienator, by then being able to own the fact that, maybe the alienated is not this negative parent that's being painted to be, because the whole thing about not disappointing is also a huge thing. Somewhere deep in that child may be recognizing, this parent is not as bad as the alienator may not, but to go home and say to the alienator, "But I had fun." And it's a really funny, ticklish place to place children.
Sean, that's
So
exactly.
children are like ropes now in a tug of war. But I just want to bear this in mind when we're talking about hope. That alienator might have been a rope in a tug of war 20, 30 years ago. So we can't discount the generational curse or the generational situation that also needs to be addressed if we're talking about hope.
Sean,
And we
you hit
notice
it.
that when you talk about ropes being pulled, we know what happens when a rope is pulled long enough with enough force. Not just snap. Snap may come eventually, but there's fraying happening that you're not even able to observe and say, this is exactly what is happening. It's happening on such a minute level that you are, fighting. We have to continue moving along though, because we want to continue this journey. So we have access. And as Sean said, we are communicating. I think that's a fantastic point, Sean. We are communicating with the child to be able to allow the child, and a reminder that sometimes the child is going to tell you they don't want to be with you. And you have to actually speak that to the child, you do not want to be with me? Where would you like to be instead? Do you want me to take you there? You have to engage the child in a process of logical working through what it is they want. Because, as was said, the child is lying. The child is lying, but the child is lying because they are walking this tightrope between the two sides. And what they want to do, what they want to say, can't come out because I have to maintain I have to keep up appearances to make sure I don't mess things up back when they go back home. Okay, because don't forget that child is thinking that where the alienator is home, not where the alienated is. It has one home, and that is with the parent that is telling it so many bad things about this other parent. So we move forward. We're communicating now. Reverend Bean, what's another good step?
Just before I get to this stuff, just want to now I want to just go back to the point I made about a social issue. Until the affluent are affected, it is an issue. It is an issue. But when the affluent are affected by it, that's when society recognizes it as an issue. And so it's wonderful platforms like this. And I'm glad that Sean also shared his story that he is also a survivor, because this will continue to raise awareness and in a wider society. But studies also show that when the child experiences the love of the alienated, most times those relationships are restored. This is studies and showing that when we have the opportunity as the alienated to make the most of that opportunity, the prodigal son making the most of that opportunity to show love. But if I can just add to it another point, I would say we need to be very careful about systems where we have the parents. The parents are in one system, and the children are in another system. And what happens too often is that we are pulling the children into the parental system. So things we want to say to the other parent or the co-parent, we're not saying it to the co-parent. We are saying it to the child. But that child has no right being in that particular system. That's a parental system. And so as adults, we are minded to keep those messages within the parental system and not drag up the children into a system they ought not be. And so I think we need to be careful of systems and be respectful of it, respecting the boundaries of systems. Again, I'm an advocate for the therapeutic approach to it as well. Intervention as we get the psychoeducation about a number of these issues that we have.
Reverend Bean, if I may, sorry, I am smiling to myself because you say that we should keep our minds about where these systems are and keep the boundaries on. But we're speaking about a narcissist.
That's right.
We're speaking about somebody who has breached that time and again, and who has brought their fight with you into the sphere of the child.
I was thinking
so the alienated response, I mean, really and truly, I think kind of the gold standard is the prodigal father, the father of the prodigal son. But I mean, you're telling me I have to sit down and just take it?
But Graham, as Reverend Bean was speaking, and he said, and he's correct, that we should keep the system separate. But the problem with respecting the systems is that you must have two persons that are willing to respect the system. Narcissists don't respect anything. Narcissists. So that's why I'm glad that we tied the whole issue of narcissism and parental alienation together, because you can see how dangerous it would be discussing parental alienation without looking at the whole dynamic of narcissism. So maybe Reverend Bean could probably address how we would be able to get the respect, because I know for sure from the studies I've done on narcissism that that's the whole idea of how they're very volatile. They're not going to follow any rules. They don't submit to any form of rule or any form of fairness.
So So again, and this is where the difficulty comes. I'm not saying it's easy, but what I'm saying is, as the alienated, you and again, if you go back and use the example of the prodigal father, he did not refuse to give his son the money. He did not go in the far places that the son went to force him to come home. Every day, though, he got up and he looked for his son to return because he believed that his son was going to return. It is not easy as the alienated, but you have to have that belief that the little seeds that you can plant on the every other weekend or the every other day or on the way school on mornings when you're dropping them to school or home on evening when you're dropping them back home from school, you have to believe that those seeds one day would find good soil and will eventually mature into a plant. That is what kept me sane going through this situation. Because if you know the narcissist alienator has no boundaries, they have no morals, no scruples, are you then going to lower yourself to that same place as well to try to win up? You want to throw more flame in the fire? It is not this. Listen, dealing with narcissistic parents and dealing with parent alienation is not something you can fix in a day. It is not a quick fix. It's something that you have to make up in your mind you're going to be in for the long haul, and you have to trust and believe that the seeds that you plant, when you get to plant seeds, one day would find good ground.
I wanted to, Sean, to hear Reverend B's thoughts on because I agree with you 100%, but I like what he raised about the parental systems and the both parents should respect, because one of the things I know about parental alienation is that when people are married and they have children, there are two dynamics going on. You have a marital dynamic and you have a parental dynamic. When you have a divorce, you have the marital dynamic ending. And what happens in terms of parental alienation is that one of the parents decide that the parental dynamic should also end. The parental dynamic should never end because the parental dynamic is actually a lifelong dynamic. So I wanted to hear, Reverend B, your thoughts on that particular issue of how do you manage, or how would you, even though that's what it should be, how would you get a parent that's a narcissist, for example, to be respectful of this parental system? Just
Well,
curious.
thank you. Well, what has worked at counseling for us and for me is that you go through other systems that force both parents to come to counseling, right? And so they're mandated to come. And that being the case, you have an opportunity now to hold up a mirror before the narcissist. And of course, we know there are different types of narcissism. Sometimes we have the grandiose narcissist, but sometimes we have those vulnerable or even a covert narcissist. So because I remember one time we had both parents. One was more grandiose in their approach, the other one was more covert in their approach. But it's being able to help them to see themselves objectively, and that this is what it is. Now, understanding this, and it has happened where they were surprised and where they were given tools to help manage. You got to be aware of it. You got to know who you are. You said it earlier, Cornelius. You got to know who you are. And then we try to manage our narcissism, be aware of it. And sometimes it doesn't work at all, right? But sometimes it does. But using other systems to get them into the counseling room, into the therapeutic room, is also a way to go to help them to see who they are and why boundaries are needed, especially as they impact the children. And of course, there are various types of counseling tools that you can use once in there. But the challenge is getting them there.
Well, Graham, one of the things I wanted to, as I hear Reverend Bean speak, um, and again, Reverend Bean is speaking a mouthful of truth and wisdom. But here's the thing, and this is the but. Or I should say, however, there's no but. However, almost all of the cases that I've heard of where you have a person that's a certified narcissist, and the whole proposition of counseling is brought where they know that they'll be put under the mirror, they don't go.
Mhm.
I mean, I know of life cases even now,
Mhm.
both local and overseas, where the narcissist will not go. And when they go to counseling, they like to manipulate even the counselors. So you have counselors that are not, that some of them may not be well trained in this area, or some of them may be new out of school or whatever. Um, they have ways of manipulating everything and everyone around them. So I don't want to make it sound hopeless, but what I'm saying is I'm saying this not to promote the idea of hopelessness, but to promote wisdom in terms of management. In other words, I wouldn't want to set up the person who is the alienated to believe that you're going to push this button and your narcissist co-parent is going to turn up at counseling sessions and they'll have a mirror put before them and it will all go well. I think that we need to give those persons hope, but hope that is based on what is observed on the ground. And I must say that all of the cases that I know of, almost all of the cases, the narcissists, they do not turn up because they don't want the mirror, because they cannot take the mirror, because the mirror is really excruciating pain is for the narcissist.
Mhm.
So if you may put a mirror in front of a narcissist and they may not see. They still may not see because there's something called cognitive dissonance. So even if you put the mirror in front of a real, true, according to you, certified, and I had a smile to myself when you said that, certified narcissist, they are not going to be able to see. So again, outside of training and so on, from my own experience, um, do not expect a quick fix situation. We're talking about, pardon?
Agreed.
Yeah,
Me
do
too,
not
I agree.
expect a quick fix.
Well said.
Expect something that is going to take time, and as difficult as it may be, you still have to remain you while the narcissist is being the narcissist.
Say that again, Sean. Say that again slowly, because I think that is the penultimate that I wanted to hear this evening. I was planning to say, say it again, Sean.
Yeah, I am putting on myself. I have to remain me while the narcissist is remaining true to who they are. And that's the narcissist. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about rebuilding our hope, understand that the hope that you're looking for is a relationship with your child, and not necessary for the narcissist to recognize that they're narcissists,
Right.
and to realize that they're practicing alienation, because chances are that parent would never see that they're narcissists and that they're practicing alienation.
Sean,
So your job is really and truly now to build the relationship with your child, which will happen over time.
Sean, you have no won the match, man, because like what you just said, right? I could actually log off of this discussion, because the truth of the matter is that when you said you being you, I would also only want to add you being your best you. You have to show up with your A game each time for that child. And not and this whole idea of diagnosing, and for persons who are listening, I would want to say, do not get involved because you're listening to a panel discussion or because you go on the internet and you discover what a narcissist is and what parental alienation is. You don't go carrying these diagnoses to a person who you suspect is a narcissist. You will make your situation worse. It is not wise. Use the information you have to help you to navigate in wisdom. And as I said, and as Sean is saying, be you, be your best you. Show up each and every time with your A game for your child or children. Forget the fact, because you're not God. You cannot change the fact that this person has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. You can't go back in their childhood and change what damaged them. You cannot go back and be their parents. You know. So I would say to be your best self each and every time, each time you show up.
I find this I was trying to make up my mind if to insert it here or to leave it as I had originally planned for the end of the uh, I think I'll do the full thing at the end. But I believe that another place in scripture, and yes, please remember that as Reverend Bean said, it requires a full gamut of therapeutic um, therapeutic approach. So we're looking at a full gamut of therapeutic approach, and we want to make sure that we do get that. However, I'm going to say go ahead and looking at scripture, there's another scripture that does focus on the values that I believe all of us have been raising so far this evening. And it's 1 Corinthians 13. And I'm going to just read verse 11 right now. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I did away with childish matters. And I think Sean's focus and specific attention to putting the responsibility on the I is critical here. Paul says the same thing in 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, not the narcissist, not my child, not anybody else, but I did these things as a child, and now I have become a man or a woman. I have put away childish things. And I think it is that we need to remember that it is incumbent on us to put away the childish things and behave, acquit ourselves as a man or as a woman. But I still want to get to the next stage in this recovery process. And so far, we do have access, we're communicating. Where does the alienated go from there, especially looking for this best possible result?
Well, all right, so go ahead, Cornelius. I'm going to give it to you. They say age before beauty. I don't know which one that's going to be.
Okay. No, I really, as Graham was speaking, I had this bursting thought in my spirit. We have come here today and we are looking at, and we have a very esteemed panel here, and we looked at a lot of logical, emotional, psychological approaches and rational and wise approaches. But the approach that is probably icing on the cake is an approach that is very spiritual. And we have to recognize that whether we are Christian or not, we all sit on a spiritual foundation. This entire reality that we live is a spiritual reality. And I want us never, ever to discount, overlook, or underestimate the value of prayer. The value of prayer. And I know there are many faiths out there, people that believe in different things and have many different religions. But I'm telling you, right, that in my personal life, if I were in the position of being an alienated, my go-to place, outside of all the other interventions, which I agree with, my go-to place to get the icing and to get full reaction or full response is to knock on heaven and prayer. We cannot underestimate. There are references in medical manuals and stuff like that to what faith-based communities have been doing that they couldn't explain. But I would say that even down to narcissism, there's a spirit behind all of the things and all of the activities you see amongst mankind. And the whole narcissism and parental alienation, they have spiritual connotations that will pass from generation to generation if they're not stamped out. But I would not want to discount or overlook or underestimate the value and the power of prayer. Over to you, Sean.
Thanks, man. I just want to look back again at the scripture just quoted. When I was a child, I taught as a child, etc. And the reason why I want to look at it again is because I understand that a child who is being used as a weapon in parent alienation would also experience parentification. So that child would hardly ever be allowed to act like, talk like, think like, behave like a child, because from very early, that child is engaging in conversations, as the Reverend was saying, that is not in their system. There's a parental system, but they're being forced to engage in that situation. So when I became a man, now notice that Paul said, when I became a man, I put away childish things. He didn't say I put away childish things and became a man. Now, I don't want to go too deeply into it, but there's a difference. The thing is that sometimes, and we can see then in children who are byproducts of parent alienation and byproducts of parentification, you will find that they grow up very quickly. They become women and men before they even, too early, and they believe that they're women and men because they're behaving like women and men. So this is another byproduct of parent alienation and the whole parentification, which I guess Cornelius, you can probably look at for another one of your family fests, the whole issue of parentification.
I was thinking the same thing, because I was saying that you mentioned it. I'm hoping that our viewers and listeners understand what parentification is. But I also want to say, Sean, before we move on to probably Reverend Bean, that when you look at the whole idea of children who are robbed, and I'm noticed robbed of their childhood, because it is a form of child abuse. You have these children who did not get to be children, but were put into the parental dynamic or the parental system as children. You find that they grow up with a lot of dysfunction. They themselves sometimes go on to be narcissists themselves, and a lot of times they end up perpetrating parental alienation as well, and the cycle continues. So, Sean, you've mentioned a lot of things that tie together beautifully, but it's unfortunate that because we'll be limited for time, that we'll probably have to have separate discussions on those. But thanks, Sean. That was a great presentation there.
Thanks.
I saw where a gentleman, his wife was a narcissist, and they alienated him from his child at age she was 10 years old. But he was consistent in writing and doing whatever he could do to reach out to the child. He spoke about patience, but also being consistent, and love and availability. And when the child turned 18, something amazing happened. On her birthday, she went to look for him, something she could not do for 8 years. But because of his consistency being there, and to see, he said, when he embraced her, he cried, she's crying. But though she was being brainwashed initially, eventually, she was able to be reunited with a biological father. But he always maintained his presence however he could. He was consistent. And so I want to say to the alienated parent, it may be very difficult, I imagine it is, but the consistency is also very important. You mentioned just now, Cornelius, the power of prayer. I think you have no pushback from us on that one at all, because prayer is, of course, a wonderful tool to not only release, but to also change situations around as well. And so trouble in the throne of God is always a very good thing. I think also, if I could add to consistent, is the power of forgiveness. The tool that we have as Christians, the ability to forgive. And forgiveness sometimes is not necessarily for them. Sometimes in forgiving is for us. We get the release. We feel better. The tension is removed when we just release it and let God be God, and allow God to do just that, be God. And so one of the wonderful tools we have at our disposal is that wonderful spiritual tool of forgiveness.
I love that. You're finished, Reverend Me?
Yeah, for now, yeah.
Yeah, because I was there thinking as you were talking about forgiveness. I said, wow, powerful. Something I was to mention as well. You see, acceptance. I think sometimes we don't accept that it is what it is. It is what it is. So together with forgiveness, acceptance, not agreement, because you're not going to agree with the fact that your child is brainwashed against you, but you accept that that's what it is that's going on. So the denial and the cycling around over and over again is something that we need to avoid. I want to share quickly a story, pretty similar to what you shared just now, Reverend Bean, but this happened in the US. At 9 years old, there was this girl. She had two brothers, so there were three children, two boys and a girl. The girl was the eldest, and she was brainwashed. They were all attempted, but somehow she got brainwashed against her father. And the two boys continued having a relationship with the father, but the girl just decided at 9 years old, I want nothing to do with my father, based on what the mother had projected. And one day, just before her 29th birthday, she challenged her brothers as to why they are getting along so well with dad, and and that is so terrible. And the boy said, that is not terrible. What, are you crazy? So then she decided to challenge her mother, because she said, my brothers are very confident that that is not this kind of person. Before, she'd never questioned it. And when she challenged her mother about the protection order that she claimed that was granted against that and yada yada, the mom admitted that it was a lie. This girl went into shock. She was a very intelligent, well-educated girl. By that time, had her degree and working as a professional. And she said, I could not believe that I believed everything my mother said and I did not question it. And by the way, children usually, based on the dynamic between parent and child, children usually are naturally connected to having to believe their parents. You don't think that the person who your two caregivers, mother and father, are the ones who will ever lie to you. You don't born with that natural instinct that they're not the ones you can't trust. But the mother admitted that there was never a protection order granted against that. To cut a long story short, that girl decided to reach out to her dad, who was always there, and he received her at 29 years old. And she said, she felt so stupid, so dumb, that I rejected my father for 20 years over a whole cadre and a whole world of lies. So I'm just saying that to say to the person who might be alienated out there, that's 20 years. Yours might be 10, yours might be 5, yours might be just 1. There is hope.
Yes.
But you just have to be your consistently best self. Offer forgiveness, accept it as what it is, and just be consistent and prayer.
But gentlemen, I am looking at our time here and I'm getting nervous because I don't see, this is so unfair. I wish we were already in heaven so that we could sit down and have the full discussion. But the problem is, when we are in heaven, we will not be discussing anything like this. So we got to make it work in the time we have right now. Very quickly, I'm going to ask you all, what are some of the spaces in society that we can look for? We talked about legal recourse from early, and we've already gone through that. What are some of the other spaces where the alienated parent could look for support and assistance in trying to go through this journey? I'm not talking about people to take command and, hey, I'm going to go with you and we're going to take your daughter and we're going to go over here. We're going to solve everything. We don't need that. We need support. We need people who will understand and will move forward. Where should the alienated parent look for that?
Well, you have agencies for sure, like part of us. For example, you have social workers like my friend Fabian Sargent. You have some social workers who are aware and familiar with it. You have priests like Reverend Bean, for example, and Sean works in the social work system. So I'll let these gentlemen speak to that. But I know for if I were to advise, apart from what I just shared, I believe that those are great places to start. And start building up your knowledge. There are lots of resources online that will help you. There are actually organizations and associations online that you can find on Facebook, on YouTube, that actually are resources to help you navigate this issue of parental alienation.
Let me just, because sorry about that. Earlier, Cornelius, you said I mentioned parentification and you didn't say what it was. So let me just quickly say what it is. Parentification basically is when you have a child taking on either the emotional or the physical role of a parent. It happens regularly in our society. So when we're talking about parent alienation, you have then the parent having the child engage in conversations that a child should not be engaged in. So on the question now of what can the alienated parent do? As Fabian just said, we also have a men's, as Cornelia said about Fabian, we have a men's chat. There's a group that Fabian formed a number of years ago, Men Empowerment Network Support. That is one group that you can freely join and feel free to have your discussions. Bring your challenges to the group.
Well, and Sean, bear in mind that there are also females that are rarely, but there are also females that are alienated as well. So just want you to remember that.
Well, but that's true. There are also female associations
in rare cases.
Yeah, that you can. But you guys spoke about Britney Spears earlier, so there are some. So for sure, the first thing I would encourage persons to be able to see it for what it is. First of all, ensure that it is actual parent alienation that you're experiencing, and that you as a parent yourself is not guilty of neglect or something like that. Because we can very easily and very quickly point the finger, make a diagnosis or something, and sometimes wrongfully so. So first of all, ensure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing as a parent. If you recognize that you are experiencing parental alienation, talk about it. We may not realize it. I think Cornelius and Bernard, I think for some people listening to this program who may be going through this may be the first time that they're able to put a label on what they're going through. First time. So they've been going through this thing for a long time, and so this is what it is. Understanding it for what it is, also understand the narcissists for who they are. And do not try to put your emphasis on trying to change the narcissist. Let your emphasis be on building the relationship with your child. And as we established just now, it's going to call for patience. It's going to call for planting seeds that you may not get to see grow within a week, within a day, a week, a month. But as Cornelius just said, maybe 20 years down the road. And finally, as was in the example of the prodigal son, the prodigal father who believed that one day his son would come home. And when the son came home, as Cornelius just said, he did it outside before, there was no judgment. So when the child who was being rude, disrespectful, and say all kind of mean things because of what they were being fed by the narcissistic parent, when that child comes to a realization and it says to come home, you have to be willing to bite your tongue when it comes to what you would really want to say to that child. But you remember when you're 12 and they try to talk to you, the rule as that. Because remember, that child was probably just regurgitating what the narcissistic parent was feeding to them. So it's going to call for patience. It's going to call for understanding, but it's doable.
I would just want to add to it. There's not much I can add to all of that in terms of support. Perhaps if you are part of a church, your church prayer group, you may want to raise the awareness there as well. But that prayer group or that church group may be a wonderful source of comfort to the alienated parent as well. And so there's hope even there within that group at church. And so, along with the other suggestions made earlier.
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time. It has been fascinating. I really must say, I don't think that word is misused at all. It has been fascinating indeed. And I believe, especially most so for those who, as Sean mentioned, may never have heard this term, may never have known that this was something other people were going through. This is something that is uh, unfortunately a little bit too frequent and regular in our society. Because it may have been buried until now, or because they just never got the opportunity to hear about it. But as we wrap up this evening, just reminding you to tune in again on Tuesday and Thursday this week for more Family Fest discussions as we shift the focus from men to the women in Family Fest Barbados in our July month of panel discussions. So, ladies, it's your time, your turn. Tuesday and Thursday this week at 7:30 p.m. each night. You can come on Facebook, come on YouTube, and join us. And of course, bring your questions, bring your queries, bring your comments. We look forward to having you. Also, next Sunday at 5:30 p.m., we will be wrapping up the Women's Week. Just reminding you, of course, that you can log on to Family Fest Barbados on our social media and give your comments on these discussions, or you can give your comments directly to us. You can message us. And we have had some people asking, how can they invest? How can they participate? How can they give their volunteer their time? Definitely, we would love to have each and every one of you. The work is great. The fields are right as to harvest, but the laborers, unfortunately, there are few. So join us. As we finish off this evening, finish off Men's Week, I would like to return our focus to this passage of scripture. And I want to encourage you as we wrap up this evening to consider this from the point of view of a parent. We usually hear it at weddings, and we usually keep it in focus for relationship between spouses. But I want you to consider yourself, especially if you're a parent this evening, as I read 1 Corinthians 13 for you. If I, as a parent, speak with the tongues of men and of messengers, but do not have love, I've become as sounding brass or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophecy and know all secrets and all knowledge, and if I have all belief so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am none at all. And if I give out all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I, as a parent, give my body to be burned, but do not have love, I have not profited at all. Love is patient. Love to my child is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not puffed up. It does not behave indecently, does not seek its own, is not provoked, reckons not the evil, does not rejoice over the unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It covers all, believes all, expects all, endures all from my child. Love never fails. And whether there be prophecies, they will be inactive, or tongues, they shall cease, or knowledge, it shall be inactive. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part shall be inactive. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child. But when I chose to become a man, I did away with childish matters. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know as I also have been known. And now belief, expectation, and love remain. These three, but the greatest of these, the greatest gift I can give my child is love. Thank you for being with us. Do have a blessed evening.
We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness. With God on our side, we're marching strong, looking out for hurting children all around, and helping the parents carry on. Standing united, we'll overcome. We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness.